This is the EWN Podcast Network.
Welcome to Late Boomers, our podcast guide to creating your third act with style, power, and impact. Hi, I'm Kathy Worthington.
And I'm Mary Elkins. Join us as we bring you conversations with successful entrepreneurs, entertainers, and people with vision who are making a difference in the world.
Everyone has a story, and we'll take you along for the ride on each interview, recounting the journey our guests have taken to get where they are, inspiring you to create your own path to success. Let's get started. Hello, I'm Kathy Worthington. Welcome to Late Boomers. Today we're excited to speak with Haleh Shoa, who will share her knowledge on how we can preserve our family histories and most valuable personal memories for ourselves and for future generations.
And I'm Mary Elkins. Haleh is the founder and CEO of Picturli, a photo organization, curation, archiving, and design studio that helps people transform their photo messes, and I can identify with that, into a secure, shareable, sortable digital library. Welcome, Haleh.
Thank you so much for having me, ladies. I'm
Great
excited
to have
be
you.
here.
Pleasure. Please tell us about your family history and the events that led you to your work today.
Yeah, so I am Iranian, and I was about 8 or 9 years old when the Iranian Revolution started to bubble up. And I remember the conversations between my parents saying, we need to leave. This is not going to be safe. And of course, it led to a much bigger upheaval, and it led my parents to essentially leave the country in different phases. So the first one to leave was my older sister, who was 15 at the time, and she wasn't able to take much with her except a tiny little suitcase. And then it was myself, my little sister, and my mom. And I remember we weren't able to take anything with us, but my mom kept saying, we need to take the photo books and the family memorabilia. We also had some religious documents that my mom wanted to preserve because it was all sort of handwritten by her great grandparents. So my parents left with the shirts on their back and 3 suitcases of memories. And decades later, when I was working in advertising and there was some free time, I would bring those albums to work and I would start scanning them and restoring them once they were digital. And I would start emailing them to my family who are in 4 different continents. And everyone was so surprised at what I had. And it was, my mom is the youngest of 6 children. So we actually didn't have that many family photos. It was mainly my oldest aunt who had most of it. So, but everyone was really pleased, and they're like, can we have a photo book? And maybe you can make us a calendar. So I started getting into really preserving my own family photos. And I bought a camera and became the family photographer. And I would take pictures of my friends' children. I never had kids of my own. So my friends' kids became sort of my subjects. And then I started so not only was I not archiving the old stuff, I was now taking digital photos and organizing those and making photo books with those. And when I was working in advertising, I sort of dug deep and into my heart and soul and figured out what is it that I absolutely love doing. And it's to preserve family stories and family memories. And I already knew how to do it because I had done it for myself. So that's kind of the story of what led me to institute and found Picturli in 2016.
I love that. That's a real labor of love. And tell us more, talking about Picturli, what exactly do you do and how do you help people preserve their treasured memories?
Yeah, so we do 3 things really well. We take the analog memories, whether it is photos, whether it is in albums, in scrapbooks, film, video, anything on tape, slides, negatives, you name it, in any kind of a format. We take that and We, of course, learn. We do things a little differently at Picturli. We don't just scan and digitize, but we learn about your family. So we begin every project with a family chart. So we want to know when you were born, when you had met your spouse, when you had your children, when your parents were born, when they passed, et cetera, et cetera. So we start every single project with a family chart, and we actually make a family tree. And then once we gather everything into our studio in Los Angeles, we organize everything chronologically, whether it is by decade or by year month. Just all depends on how detailed our clients want to get. And once we do that, then we are able to digitize it. And once it's digital, we're able to change the name of the files and change the format so that when you are enjoying these as digital, they are all sortable and searchable in any of in on your phones, on your iPads, or any which way you'd like to enjoy them.
Well,
So
you have a
that's the
lot of
analog
people
to
working
digital.
for you, right? To help you with this. This is a mammoth project.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And as we're going through it, we also curate, which is why the tagline of my company is Picture Life Curated, because we have amassed so much stuff, and including that are photos that we never really went through to cull through to curate. So we get a lot of clients who are like, these I have 75 different envelopes and we never even saw what's in the envelope. So they went and got it processed, and then life took over because they had children, and they were working, and they never really went through their photos. So we make sure we curate that and only keep the best of. So that's the analog to digital. And we also specialize in gathering digital assets from your phones, iPhones, old computers, all the different clouds. And we organize that by year and month and bring it all together with all the things that we have digitized from the analog. And
Oh,
That's
good.
huge.
Well, how can an extended family work together to organize a large collection of family photos and memorabilia? How does
that's a
that
really
work?
good question. It's the first thing that we always encourage our clients to do is make sure everything's gathered in one place. And now, do we get phone calls, once we start the project or even years later to say, I found another box? Yes, all the time. But for us to be able to really learn about a family, if once everything's gathered in one place, that's the best way to do it, because then we can also prioritize on how to approach a really large collection, which is what we specialize in. We get like garage full of boxes or closet full of albums, and a lot of times our clients don't even know where to start. So we can help them with prioritizing that.
Yeah, it sounds
I
like
think
even a real big challenge to even get the stuff all in one place. I just don't even know how to do that. Very
Yeah, I
difficult.
mean, of course, we can help with that as well, because we have a lot of clients who may not be able to go into the attic or the closet or to the basement or wherever their photos are to even gather that. So there's there's a lot of way. I mean, that you can hire someone to help you gather those if the boxes are heavy, because boxes of photographs and albums tend to be really, really heavy. So
Hmm.
thank God there's services out there like Thumbtack and different services where you can hire someone to actually bring the boxes in.
Hmm.
oh that's
Wow.
uh, I think you've answered in a way the question I had for you, which is why should someone invest in hiring a professional photo organizer versus doing it themselves? But also, uh, you may have more to say about that. But what do they need to know ahead of time, and what questions should they be asking this person they hire?
Yeah, I think the best thing to do is to make sure, if they want to do their digital stuff, is to make sure that they have all their credentials in terms of what is the login information of that iPad or the phone, the old phone that they have, or maybe their photos used to be in Dropbox or Google or a different platform. So to have that information ready, is one thing. And then the second thing is to have the family information. I encourage a lot of my clients to reach out to the elders in their family if that's available to them still, to get them involved, because the elders love to talk about the stories. And, we rarely say, hey, who's in this picture? And, what was your relationship to my great aunt, for example, or whoever it is in that picture. So getting the elders involved, getting your cousins involved. If you're yourself elderly, calling your extended family to see if they have any information. Getting the names and dates of people as much as possible so that we can preserve that as we're organizing the family collection.
That's great.
It's
I know
it's
there. It's
mind-boggling
quite
how what a
often
big
when I'll look at an old picture and think, who is that person in that picture? That's not my father. It's not his father. Who is that?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
yeah.
I have a great story. My second client out the gate, they had photographs from 1839 until today. So
Whoa.
her grandmother actually preserved their entire family story, dating back to, photographs were 3 years old in 1839. The first daguerreotype started to be produced in 1836. So they had a representation of every kind of photograph that there ever was. And the grandmother tried to identify the people. And, by the time she got to it, a lot of the photographs were faded.
Yeah.
Life can treat the photographs really terribly. And which is why I do encourage all my clients to preserve them as soon as possible, because every year that passes, it gets to be, more faded and more degraded. So
How do you?
once we scanned these photographs and we started to apply facial recognition, we actually noticed that the people that she had tagged were different people, because you can't really see, sometimes the photographs are so small or so faded that once we scan them, we do apply a little bit of color correction to it. So to bring back its original life to it. And I was able to tell my client, like, look, this isn't your great aunt's sister. This is actually the cousin on the other side. And we were able to really put the photos together to be able to really tell who the people were. It's really incredible. The
That's
stories that
so amazing. How do you work
Yeah,
on preserving
totally.
family memories of a family that you don't personally have access to?
So, doing the family chart is is exactly where we always start. And if we don't, we have a lot of clients who are very busy individuals. They are globetrotters. They're not always available to us. So we create a Google Doc and we put, once we sort of see the different family members, we take pictures and put the pictures in a Google Doc and ask our clients to identify the family members and the relationship to them. We just actually got a client who I never met them, and we got about 17 boxes,
Oh,
and it is husband and wife. So it was their stuff that they have created together over the years of 30 years of being married and having children. And then it was his family. So his parents had passed and he amassed all their photos. And then it was also her family. So we determined, we sort of separated the three different families, and we always like to start with the oldest to learn who the elders are and what their relationship is, and then trickle it down to the youngest. So that's sort of our process of
mm,
how we can learn about the different family members.
that's so interesting. I want to backtrack for 1 second. You mentioned that you used photo recognition on some of the very old photos.
Mhm.
Is there, I had never heard of having photo recognition of people perhaps who were born in the 1800s. How does that work?
Well, so it's all sort of AI, right? So I
Mhm.
know if you ladies have you take pictures with your phone and your phone says, is this person? Like, so if you identify someone even in your phone, it will kind of go through your phone and it will pick out, let's say, your own photos, right? It says, is this you? And then you can kind of go and say, yes, these are me. So what that's doing is the AI, which is all cloud based actually, goes through and recognizes the faces in all the photos. So it's the same technology that we apply to the scans once we are done digitizing the photographs. So once it becomes a digital file, we can enhance it, we can restore it. We rarely restore actual photographs, so we just scan them, we preserve them in archival boxes, and then we restore them once they're digital so that we can reprint them and our families can enjoy them.
Mm-hmm.
I think you've just answered my question about how you suggest we remove chaos from our photo organizing, because I have films, photos, slides. I have photos that are on, I don't know, in photo books, albums that I can't even recognize half the people in them. How do
Right.
you,
Yeah. And that's the other part is that once we're able to identify family members, and if we understand our clients' goals, so a lot of times we get people whose parents have already passed, and we go
Mm-hmm.
through the parent stuff and they don't know half the people. So we always give them permission to discard those photographs, which is heartbreaking, especially if they're really old. But if you don't know who they are, if they're very, very old, meaning from the 50s back, we do recommend scanning them because maybe the facial recognition will actually pick up the fact that, oh no, this is your dad when he was much younger, So,
Yeah, that's
so,
good.
but in our curation process, we advise our clients to not necessarily keep the scenery shots. Like, let's say you went to Africa or Hawaii and you took a lot of shots of the scenery, which was breathtaking. But those are the kind of things that you don't necessarily want to keep or pass on unless you're a phenomenal photographer, of course. Um,
Mm-hmm.
or if that scenery has a family significance, maybe your grandfather's ashes were thrown at the foothills of that mountain. So that's a significant part of the family history with that scenery shot. So,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I mean, so we have so many different aspects of the way we curate, but we typically like to keep everything that a family member is in, all photos. And the 80s and 90s are kind of like the digital era of right now. That's when film was really cheap. That's when we would get tons of duplicates for 1 cent. And so
Mm-hmm.
we get a lot of things from the 80s and 90s that are like, that's when we really amassed photos. And
Mm-hmm.
so curating that is a lot more important than, let's say, curating something from the 40s. We typically keep everything from the older decades.
I see. Yeah. And how do we protect our family memories from natural disasters? And also in connection with that, what's the best way to back up our photos?
So the natural disaster, so your digital photos are much more in danger of getting lost because, say, if your phone is not backed up and you drop your phone, all your photos are gone in a nanosecond. If your photos are on a hard drive and only on that one hard drive and they're not backed up into the cloud, it's all gone if that drive fails. So make sure your digital photos are safe first, because your analog stuff, I mean, yes, God forbid you could have a flood or a fire, which is very real, and especially where we live.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, get them archived, get them preserved. Um, I think going through it even on your own and making sure that you're taking out the things that don't really have a meaning to you anymore. But there are plenty of services out there. I belong to an organization called the Photo Managers, and I'm certified through that program, and they're certified photo managers all over the globe now. So if there are any listeners who may not be in the United States, go on the photomanagers.com and find a certified photo managers that can help you get your stuff organized and preserved.
Oh,
That's
I didn't
great
even know that
advice. Thank you.
existed.
I didn't either. Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
Yeah.
Um,
absolutely.
yeah. I loved what you said about creating a family tree. How do you recommend someone actually tell their story through photos?
Well, I mean, the first thing to do is to make sure everything is preserved, and then we can get to the fun part, which is the third thing we do really well, and that is we make a lot of photo books that we can now put in some copy in there about family history. We can sort of
Mm-hmm.
tag the photos, whether it's each photo or put a little story at the bottom of the page. We can make videos, slideshows. We have made several different legacy films where we actually bring in a production team and we interview our families and they can talk about their family history, and we overlay that with the photos. There's so many different ways to be able to preserve the family story and pass it on to future generations.
Mm.
But the first thing to do is to really get your things organized and make sure everything's archived properly and high res, because you want to do it, you do it once, do it right. We get a lot of, unfortunately, we get a lot of families who use sort of the box systems where you put a bunch of things in a box and then you get your stuff back, and they're not really, they don't really know what to do with that. And the quality is not that great because what they get back is a bunch of files on a thumb drive that are called IMG 234, IMG 235. And they're like, I don't know what to do with this now. But, to work with a professional who understands the true meaning of archiving is we make sure we rename and redate all the files that we give back to our clients, so that when you're
Mm.
looking at it, you can see that, oh, this is from 1940 and this is who's in that photo.
Yeah. That's
Wow,
great. That's
that's. But
great.
what if a family has thousands of digital and paper photos and slides? How do you organize those, and how much time does that take?
The time depends on how chaotic we get. If we get a huge bin full of loose photos, that takes a lot longer than if we get a bin of albums, because whoever made those albums took the time to not only curate the photos, but also took the time to organize them. More or less, they're in an album in an organized fashion. So we can take that organization. So let's say it's 1989, it's maybe the whole year. So we could take that organization and make sure that once we digitize the photos from that album, they're renamed and redated for 1989.
Mm.
Maybe it is the summer of 89 if we don't have the exact specifics of where they had gone that summer, or maybe it is a trip to Canada, so then we can say trip to Canada, specifically 1989 July 15th, for example. So it depends on how chaotic it is. It depends on how much information is already there. We actually don't spend too much time trying to worry about that because perfection is the enemy of progress.
Yeah.
And,
Mm.
we just want to make sure that we get it done, you know.
I
We
love
want to
that
make sure we get,
perfection is the enemy of progress. That's for
I
sure.
agree.
Because sometimes
yes, we need to
you're if
remind ourselves, especially as women, we need to remind ourselves that it doesn't have to be
True.
perfect. We just need to get it done.
That's true.
And I'm a perfectionist, so I have to remind myself every day, and I have to add in perfection is the enemy of profit. Like, let's move. Come on, let's go.
mm-hmm,
I
you
love that.
do.
That's it. You're so right. That's true about women. Women have to have everything perfect before they do anything.
Yes. So in terms of how long it takes, going back to that question, depends on how messy it is or how organized it is. It depends on how detailed the family wants it. Some families say I'm okay with just decades. If we do have like a very large number in a particular decade, we encourage them to invest in maybe doing like early 50s, mid 50s, late 50s versus just all 50s, right? But it depends on their budget as well. So the more detailed we get, the more time it takes.
Mm.
How do you
That's
structure your fees?
We charge an hourly rate to work with our clients or to work on their projects. So
Mm-hmm.
it's an hourly rate, but we give a quote based on the technology that we use. Um, in terms of our pricing structure, it's basically the level of technology that we need, a price per hour. And then items that are scanned and are transferred are just as per one item. So like, for example, a VHS is $30 a tape. A scan of a photograph or a slide is anywhere from $150 to $175 per scan. But we give a whole a price per each phase based on what we receive from our clients.
Yeah. I'm curious. I'm still thinking how you do curate photographs, say I have photographs from really the 1800s or the early 1900s that go way back
It's
into my
amazing.
grandparents, great grandparents. How can you even figure out who's in the picture, even though you use AI and photo recognition? How do you curate those? And how do you, because so many of them are faded and
That's
or
right.
torn.
We actually don't curate the stuff from back then. We handle it literally with white gloves. We all wear gloves when we're handling those photographs, when we're handling all photographs, actually. And we just scan them. We scan them in the 1800s, right? So we'll probably choose a decade, call it 1890s, and we'll scan them all. That will all be named 1890s ancient family photos, or whatever whatever the client wants us to name them. And then we can go in, and once it's actually scanned, and we can mess with the levels post scanning, meaning like we can make it a little brighter or a little sharper. Then we can really see the faces, and then we can sit with our clients through Zoom and identify those people.
Would you talk a little bit about some of the work you're most proud of as far as preserving family treasures, and also in your work with advertising agencies or companies like Apple or Chrome Hearts or some of those?
Yeah, in 2022, Picturli was hired to curate 34 years of assets from a company called Chrome Hearts, which is a $1 billion lifestyle and fashion brand that no one's ever heard of because they are so exclusive. They have about 40 stores globally. And what I didn't know is that when I got hired by them, I had no idea that they make everything in Hollywood. They own all of the buildings that everything is made in. Everything that they do is handmade. And all the assets that we were curating was mainly photographed. It's a husband and wife team. And the husband is the manufacturing extraordinaire. And his wife is the stylist and the photographer. I mean, they're just the incredible power couple that I had the absolute utmost pleasure and honor to work with. And so when we got in, I had no idea, like, I didn't even know Chrome Hearts. And when they gave me access to 34 years, and it was basically anyone and everyone we've ever heard of was in their photographs. And we got to dive deep and start curating it from 1988 all the way to 2022. And this was an incredible project to be able to deliver for them to make their own legacy book. So it was a really great, yeah.
That's a huge project.
Yeah, it was a great project. It really was. And so that was amazing. And about a decade ago, I was approached by Apple to essentially head up a team to, do you guys remember the iPad mini? I don't know if you remember the little iPads.
Oh, yeah.
So they were launching that globally, and I was in charge of the global launch of the iPad mini. So I had about 56 people on the team, and I had 2 months to make this happen. So it was a really fun project, and I had to sign 47 NDAs. So that is not, so we signed a lot of NDAs with our families in this business as well, because we work with a lot of celebrities, and just we get into their private business. So I'm not. It's not uncommon for us to sign NDAs, but 47 was quite a bit. It took me 6 hours to go through that.
That's huge.
But yeah, I mean, honestly, that like those two projects were incredible, but it's the preserving the just any family photographs that brings me so much joy. it brings them so much joy. There's never a dry eye in the house when I'm delivering a project and when they can go through their stuff. It's such an incredible honor to be able to be part of family history and be able to preserve their memories for them and to bring them peace of mind. What we do really brings a lot of peace of mind. So, but one of
Yeah.
my third client, he is an African American professor, and he's also African American, and he had a lot of photographs from the 1800s, which is really rare for African Americans. But his family was from
Mm-hmm.
the North, and they always had a lot of money, so he had these really beautiful photographs with these opulent outfits in them. So we ended up actually preserving the letters that his grandfather had written to his grandmother while he was at war. And then, of course, we did the photographs as well. And he decided to donate the letters to the Schoenberg Institute, and which I thought was really great. And so 3 weeks into that, the Schoenberg Institute calls him and says, "You're not going to believe this. Your grandfather had another woman who he was in love with, because we got those letters donated to us and we did the comparisons, and it's the same person." And so he had to and it was so incredible for him as a historian himself to now learn about this whole other side of his grandfather's family that he had no idea
Oh,
about.
I'm
Sounds a lot like
interesting.
finding your roots, finding that there's other people that perhaps weren't your
Yeah.
grandparents.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yes. It was really fascinating. So apparently the grandfather had a love affair with his cousin. He was in love with his cousin, so he would write her stories. I don't think they ever lived in the same place together. I think it was more of a affair of the hearts. But it's just finding these stories and telling these stories are so incredible. So we made
But
sure we
how
did a little bit.
incredible that both people donated to the same place and so they could
I know,
cross-reference. That's really the weirdest part of it,
so incredible.
you
Yeah, I
know?
mean, you can't make stuff up. It's just so
Haleh,
incredible.
Haleh, what would you like our audience to have as a takeaway today?
Okay, so yeah, I've composed a 7-step process to organizing your photos. I
Mm.
hope that it's inspirational and aspirational, and you can get that 7-step process by signing up on our website, picturli.com/podcast. And make sure you mention the podcast that you make sure you mention this podcast, please, when you sign
Mm-hmm.
up.
Late boomers.
Fantastic. Late
That's
boomers.
Thank you, Haleh. Our guest today on Late Boomers has been Haleh Shoa, founder and CEO of Picturli, the photo organization, curation, archiving, and design studio that helps families and businesses truly transform their photo collections into an archive that will delight them and their generations for decades to come. You can reach Haleh at picturli.com. That's picturli.com. And as she said, you can also sign up on picturli.com/podcast and get her 7-step information to organizing your photos.
And we always
incredible.
want to remind you, our listeners, that we're grateful to you for listening and receiving inspiration from our Late Boomers podcast. We appreciate you so much, and we ask you to spread the word to your friends about our podcast. We're on Instagram at I am Kathy Worthington and at I am Mary Elkins and at Late Boomers. Please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform and on our Late Boomers podcast on YouTube. Thanks again, Haleh.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Just great. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Late Boomers, the podcast that is your guide to creating a third act with style, power, and impact. Please visit our website and get in touch with us at lateboomers.biz. If If you would like to listen to or download other episodes of Late Boomers, go to ewnpodcastnetwork.com.
This podcast is also available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and most other major podcast sites. We hope you make use of the wisdom you've gained here and that you enjoy a successful third act with your own style, power, and impact.